Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Labours of Sports Coaching. And today I'm going to continue with the momentum that we started where we went over Autonomy Support 101 by actually now discussing Competence Support 101. So there's a lot of reasons for why competence support is really important, not just in its own sort of isolated bubble insofar as, offering the correct structure and praise and encouragement that our players need to both get better and feel good today at the same time, but also for its potential to foster, as a consequence of that, adaptive forms of motivation and actually to aid the other basic psychological needs that athletes have insofar as their innate desire or need for autonomy and the desire and need for a sense of relatedness. So let's discuss it at the macro level. All right. Again, if we know that, self-determined athletes do better, oftentimes they're linked with good outcomes insofar as effort, persistence, performance in some cases, well-being, all the stuff that we want to see. We can appreciate that at the crux of it, if we go back to considering, what intrinsic motivation is in its most purest form, that innate love and interest for being embedded in an activity, it's very unlikely that someone can innately love an activity and feel such a deep level of reward just through being in the activity if they don't, in some respect, feel like they are either already good at it or at least on a pathway towards mastering the activity. So that's it's a bit of a given. Also, because obviously people are complicated and we carry multiple motivations for why we do anything with us into various tasks. If there are more extrinsic purposes for doing something, not purely for the love and enjoyment, because maybe we see value in it, we see it as part of who we are, because perhaps we feel a sense of guilt and are drawn to that way, or even, is becoming even less self-determined because we're just looking to get a reward or avoid a punishment or any of those things. You can start to appreciate that if you start to get better at a task is a gateway to, over time, internalising the reasons for why you take part in an activity. Okay, so that athlete maybe doesn't enjoy what they're doing initially, but they actually start to get better at it. Maybe get recognition for the improvements that they're making at a task. Maybe they come to see the value of the task in association with other different strategies that the coach is using on them to help them along that journey. That competence support and sense of competence through competence support is really powerful for keeping them on the pathway towards further internalizations of the reasons for being there. It also unlocks, by virtue of being competent supportive, it unlocks a better sense of relatedness, i.e. the sense that we feel being cared for and a sense of belonging and being part of a community, by extension of the need for a competent supportive coach to be interpersonally involved with an athlete. If you are really offering a structured environment, an environment that's encouraging, you are by its nature offering a care towards the athlete and you're communicating care and commitment to them in many ways. So again, it's really important for that. Also, if you're just nothing but, and this is why I started with autonomy support in the previous episode of this little mini series, I suppose, but if you're nothing but autonomy supportive towards an athlete, okay, but it's a chaotic environment that you're providing them, that's not autonomy support. That's just negligence as a coach. That's just laissez-faire. That's just letting people do what they want. That isn't being deliberate and goal-orientated about where you want to take your athletes next. So you need structure within autonomy. Autonomy support is not endless. There is structure to it. It's about supporting an athlete's autonomy, supporting, not wholly empowering. It's not completely allowing the athlete to take the wheel and you leave them to their own devices entirely and often at the mercy of what they don't know that they need to do and those sorts of things. Autonomy must come with structure. We have to have both things at the same time. There's a lot of research to show that outcomes are always best where there's environments that have got good levels of structure along with autonomy supportive mechanisms included within it. So that's in terms of a very quick argument for what we're trying to do with competence support and why it's really important for the motivational process and also the developmental process within the sport and how all those things link together. Now, how can a coach, in the most basic terms, be competent supportive? So there's 2 points to this, right? And I like the analogy of we need to develop confidence today while we foster competence tomorrow. And what I mean by that is it's kind of like, and I use the metaphor sometimes if I'm speaking to athletes about their own confidence. Imagine you're building a house, okay, and every time you put a brick on to one brick, you take a brick away. You're never building anything. And what I mean by that is that while a coach is offering a structured environment that allows an athlete to engage effectively with it, and that's a big part of a competence support is structure, they also have to make the athlete feel good. And where they're immediately at, they need to feel good, or at least on a pathway of progress today, dealing with the immediate person and what the immediate person requires, so that all of that hard work underpinning, the praise and the sort of easy reward that they can get a sense, that dopamine hit that we want our athletes to feel, that can continue, because we need to inspire persistence in hard things. And again, therefore, the feeling that an athlete gets of feeling as though they're making progress towards hard things is invaluable in that respect. So that's why I try to break competence support into how good you make athletes feel and how good you make athletes. Yeah. So they are they're related to each other. They are complementary to one another, but I think it would be remiss of us as coaches to only care about structure if you're not making athletes feel good about themselves, and only make athletes feel good about themselves if you're not actually helping them get better. So there's two things there. Okay. So let's cover the feel good coach to start, right? That element of every coach there to start, so that the confidence instilling coach to begin with. So there's two things that we need to do. There's a few things within this itself. So praise. Now we need to think about the amounts of praise that we give, and also the quality of our praise. Okay. So what I mean by this is its most basic form: encourage an athlete, say they're doing well, praise them, say well done. And in a nutshell, is very important. Now, what are you signaling when you do praise an athlete is important. Okay, now I'm not saying it's one in the same theory, but for those that are more familiar with like achievement goal theory, or even like Carol Dweck's sort of growth mindset stuff, that points our attention towards how the feedback we receive, what that tells us about what we need to care about. And there's a lot of value in ensuring that our praise is task orientated, or better known as sort of mastery focus, rather than ego orientated. Which essentially means comparing athletes to other people and focusing praise around normative comparison. So task orientation, growth mindset is where we are telling an athlete, well done because they have worked hard, well done because they are making progress. We're focusing the praise on process. We're not making global assessments on how an athlete or why an athlete has done well there. Okay. Because globally, if I say to an athlete that was fantastic, you're really talented, or some sort of, mix of that, some sort of like, equivalent of that, well done with that goal, you're really fast. Better praise would actually be signaling towards, well done on getting on the end of that cross. You've been working really hard at your agility and your physical preparation for the match. So that is me signaling that the athlete is making progress, and signaling that what has been instrumental to that progress has been their process, and the things that are within their control, the things that they can nurture in their own accord with your help, of course, and saying well done. So there's two things that have to happen there. We have to praise enough that we get a good stimulus. I'm saying enough, and I'll come back to that, but also praise the correct things. So that's really important. The amount of praise we give is also something we have to consider. Because if I'm nothing but a complimentary coach, it's a bit like, as soon as you're giving that treat, the first time you're giving it feels amazing. What that was fantastic. That coach said I was so good today. But then you become habituated to it the more you get it. And this isn't to suggest that we should withhold praise, but just ensure that when we do give praise, it actually was merited. And this is a wee bit of a prelude to when we talk about structure. Having a structured environment, a structured interpersonal style is competence support, and why both those things have to occur together. Because if an athlete, and let's say I work with kids aren't daft, sometimes there's well-intentioned coaches who do nothing but praise a kid, even when they've not done very well. And if it's not that the kid themselves is aware of that, their teammates also are. And then we're talking about what we're trying to avoid with good praise is that normative comparison. Where kids then start to pick up on, because this is another temptation we have as coaches, is to praise the athletes who are struggling more. But again, if that actually in some sense can accentuate the feeling of deficiency and actually prompt an athlete to start to look around to see, well, why are other people who objectively seem to be doing better than me receiving less praise than me? So it reduces the credibility of the praise if you do nothing but give praise. So, and it's also reduces the stimulus that it can provide if you just give it out all the time. Okay, so it's kind of like there's something to holding back praise enough that it sustains its power of impact when you do give it, and also something to ensuring that you don't praise so often, and you actually are also conscious perhaps of the group dynamics wherein praise is given, that you try to avoid easy detection where there is an individualised reason for why you're giving the praise. Are we praising people in front of a group? Great, that could be a real boost because then it shows the teammates that you are demonstrating that you're validating that someone has done really well. Again, if that is done to the point where it also becomes obvious that other people aren't receiving the same amount, even where it seems merited, then it can create a lot of confusion and cynicism around why that praise is there, and it stops being effective. That's where maybe individualised praise, insofar as, taking people to the side and doing it in that way might be better. So there's a wee bit of a nuance around that. Also, I think within the confidence building element of competence support, encourage athletes to take on hard tasks. That doesn't just fit in with the loop of trying to foster a growth mindset and be task involving, but it also, by encouraging an athlete to take on hard tasks, you are communicating that you feel they have enough competence to do so. So, you've said that they're good without saying that they're good explicitly, and that's pretty cool. So if we're thinking about, I want to help this athlete, or I just want to keep this athlete feeling good, but I don't want to saturate, the praise, the good feel factor of the environment by me constantly explicitly saying it. Well, why don't I indirectly praise them through encouraging them to take on hard tasks and showing confidence in their ability to do well in that hard task as well is sort of linked to that as well. So that stuff's really, really important. Okay. So we covered briefly there the confidence affirming element of competence support. Now we need to think about structuring the environment in such a way that we are helping an athlete actually get better, or helping an athlete show not just you but also themselves that they are good. So these things go back and forward. We have to ensure that we are setting tasks that are appropriately challenging, but are challenging. We also have to ensure that we are giving constructive feedback to an athlete. In some cases, that may be criticism, but you're doing it constructively. Okay? We have to do the intervention. We can't be avoidant of telling an athlete that they need to get better at something. So we just need to ensure that we marry more direct, important conversations or components of conversations with elements of praise or elements of things, as I say, that can help not lessen the blow, but just also be prepared to have a bit of a blow at times as well. I think it's, this is where you have to recognise that it's okay to coach, and coaching sometimes does require being truthful. So start making sure that if you're working with an under-9 team, that you're not giving them a drill that you found on the internet that was done with under 15s, or you're not communicating information about what you want a younger kid to do. Senior kids could understand, but cognitively that kid just isn't there yet. So thinking about language, thinking about the actual task itself and the difficulty of the task, thinking about the goalpost that you set for the players. And this would also apply at senior level as well. If a senior player has only been working with you for so many weeks, don't set them a task or have a concept in mind when you're working with them that is actually week 20 when you're only on week 4. So I think that's important. When an athlete needs to get better, tell them, okay? Don't hide the fact that they're flawed. That is trying to protect and get a cheap win today, actually at the detriment of tomorrow, because longer term, if that athlete doesn't get better and they start to plateau under you, either it makes your relationship dysfunctional and that ends up bringing that relationship to an end, or even worse, if the athlete believes that it's not about you. And I'm not trying to put this on a coach as such, but if they actually just take it to say that, I'm not actually getting any better and it's because of myself, again, we're actually diminishing the quality of their motivation because their sense of competence is being jeopardized through lack of action and lack of structured, challenging activity with honest feedback within that activity. And that isn't controlling behaviour. And this is where we just need to be a wee bit, and this is a separate conversation for another episode, but recognise that, to be structured is actually, and to be honest, and do so in a way that's direct but sensitive, that isn't controlling, that's interpersonally involving. That is what autonomy is meant to be. Highly involved, but non-restrictive. Yeah, and we spoke at the very start about how competence support can invite the sense of relatedness into the conversation, into the relationship through your involvement and the fact of what your involvement demonstrates about the care that you have towards your athletes, that you're going to work really hard to get them better, to be honest with them for the value that brings towards the progress. So those sorts of things all have to occur. So in a nutshell, I just want us to keep in mind what we're trying to do with competence support, okay? What competence is made up of, okay? That it's about affirmation and validation of current performance, but also of, recognising how we can chart a path out for an athletes towards improvement and how they can actually get better to feel better, okay? And we're also thinking there around, okay, as part of that confidence element, are we offering praise in the right amounts and the right quality? Okay, are we also setting up an environment that the athlete can engage effectively with by ensuring that it is achievable, but also that is challenging them in order to actually spark reflection, spark conversation, spark teachable moments that lead towards their improvements? Those things are so key. If we were to contrast that with a coach who, and remember as well, we're thinking not just about how we can avoid actively frustrating our athletes' needs by, in the sense of competence, telling an athlete they're not good enough to do something, criticising an athlete without any, sense of maybe the effort that they did put in, even if they were unsuccessful at the outcome, or sense of how they can get better. If we're not just doing that, and that is bad in itself, but also maybe we're just neglecting the need to make them feel good and to feel like they can get better. So we do give some structure, but not a lot. Our exercises that we put on or the targets that we set are kind of vague and ambiguous. Or, we do praise, but not enough. Both that deprivation of need satisfaction and also the frustration of it, actively frustrating it, those are both really, really bad inhibitors towards a more self-determined athlete. So we have to consider that. Don't have vague expectations. Don't be ambiguous in the way that you set up what the task is. Don't be avoidant of in some sense harsh, or maybe even better put, direct conversations. Ensure that you are coaching the athlete. Okay. And I know this sometimes gets brought into another arm wrestle between the kind of coach who's seen as being overly directive and doesn't help foster self-regulation by allowing the game to be the teacher. Both competent and interpersonally involved coach can have a game-based approach to coaching, because that in itself, and fostering that sense of self-regulation through setting a task that is designed within a game format, but has enough affordances within it and aids within it, is really good. The game-based coach that does nothing but games and sets up an environment where it's too much like the game because it's so representative of practice to the point where you haven't controlled any elements of the environment that can be too challenging in order for some sort of task that you want an athlete to achieve to actually occur, that isn't helpful game-based coaching. That's negligent. That isn't good game-based coaching. That's not good coaching at all. So in the same way, if we allow an athlete to try something out and they don't get it right, there's a point in which you can only keep allowing them to keep failing before you do need to actually offer direct instruction and a pathway for how to get better. Otherwise, again, that isn't a competent supportive environment. That's a chaotic environment. That isn't autonomy supportive, therefore, by extension, because you're not supporting the athlete you're not empowering agency for the athlete to get better. You're actually just giving poor coaching. You're just giving them the illusion of agency. And if anything, even worse, you're probably putting the athlete's responsibility for getting better too much onto them, because you've actually removed any sense of stabilizers which you are meant to provide as the autonomy supportive coach in order for them to chart that path effectively. So start to recognize those things. Don't look at directive coaching in the way that competent supportive coaching can be. Not has to be, but can be, and at times does need to be, insofar as how you have conversations and when you do need to intervene. Don't look at that as just anti autonomy. Look at that as helpful for autonomy. Look at that as helpful for relationships because of the interaction of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So hopefully that's of help to you guys. As I say, I'm just trying to kind of build up some of the basic fundamental elements of need supportive coaching in a way that hopefully is actionable to you guys. And of course, I do have some more other nuanced conversations available on the podcast, and we're going to keep kind of chatting about this area. But go and try it out and actually go forward with your structured, in some sense organized, in some sense controlling approach to coaching. If you want, we want to even steal it and not be so worried about the semantics of what we call actually structured activity. Again, there is a differentiation between real controlling coaching, which is harmful, and controlling coaching that is just organised and just structuring the environment for the athlete, and all sorts of other reasons. Go and do that with a bit more confidence and don't feel like you're being a bad person for coaching. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. Please subscribe to the podcast, guys, just while I've got you, because I'm aware that, I'm so grateful for all the downloads that we've been getting. But actually, sometimes it's important for people to follow it just to help others discover it. Also, just be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can search for me on LinkedIn. When you do, you actually can then receive a free motivational psychology newsletter that you'll receive if you're already on LinkedIn. Equally, in the show notes, you can actually subscribe to get it straight to your email inbox. And I also operate an independent version of the newsletter that's independent of social media. So again, and there's lots of tips in there for how we can be more need supportive in our coaching. Some of these conversations that we have in the podcast, I flesh out within the newsletter, while also keeping you up to date with some of the research that is going on in this space that's getting updated all the time, so that you could keep updating your knowledge for the betterment of your athletes. So yeah, guys, I hope this interview with myself, me interviewing myself, I hope this episode has been as useful to you as I've intended for it to be. Okay, so I will see you next time. Thank you, guys.